Guys, I was literally just jumping through a random 2-hour video one night that had all of Murder Jones' episodes in order, just so I could see how each episode transitioned into one another. That act of curiosity, of course, somehow got me unintentionally sucked into episode 6, so I ended up rewatching it that night just cause. Tell me how rewatching this episode somehow ended with me figuring out how V fucking survived. Hey geniuses, Science Gal here, and welcome back to my channel. Now I don't know if I've just been living under a rock over the past year or not, but I have not for the life of me seen anyone in the Murder Jones fandom talk about how they think V survived after Dead End's ending. Which, to be fair, this wasn't something I really thought about much myself either until the night before I started writing the script for this video. I don't know, y'all. I just thought that the photo she sent Lizzie in episode 8 was implying that she somehow managed to kick the Sentinels' asses after all, and got a sick new pet out of it. After rewatching Dead End recently, however, my perspective on how V survived past this episode's ending has completely changed. So let's fucking talk about it, shall we? Back in 2023, the implication of Dead End's ending was a complete mystery to the entire fandom, as there was no way of knowing at the time whether or not V had really died in the end, or somehow managed to make it out of there alive. Episode 7 later hinted at the idea that she somehow managed to survive, as we could see Lizzie texting some mysterious person in the third scene who was implied to be a friend of hers that had asked her to go out and look for Jay. After episode 8 released a couple of months later, V was then officially confirmed to have cheated death as she made her grand appearance of both Jay and the audience alongside her new pet Sparky. Talk about how epic the reveal was and how you and my friend were screaming about it. Okay. Okay, I'm joking. So, back when episode 8 released, I actually remember watching this scene with my friend. We were both on a Discord call and we just finished binge watching the other 7 episodes that were out currently on the day that episode 8 was releasing. And I kid you not, when V made her big entrance, me and my friend just started screaming at the top of our lungs on the call. We were so excited and happy that V was alive. It was kind of implied in episode 7, to actually just see her come back. This looks so awesome. By the way, shout out to that friend, because I know you're watching. Hello friend, you know who you are. There you go, you get a shout out in the video. A lot of people were disappointed to see that she had survived, considering that Dead End's ending was set up to imply that she was sacrificing herself, and wasn't intending to make it out of there alive, which kinda in turn took away the impact the scene held for a lot of people. Here's the thing though, V was in reality fully intending to die to the Sentinels when she made herself sacrifice. She had no intention of fighting them back when they were approaching her, and was instead willing to let herself get killed if it meant that the others made it out alive. She was planning to die in that moment, and she fully accepted that fate. A fate that would have come to fruition if Sparky hadn't stepped in and saved her life before that could happen. Now, I don't want to sit here and say that I'm necessarily the first person to come up with this theory, since someone else has probably pieced this together already somewhere else and I just never saw it. But who knows? I can't prove that's true. Maybe I'm wrong. But fuck shit, we're balling regardless, because living with uncertainty is okay, people. Now, this is definitely one of those rare theories I come up with that are surprisingly not that batshit insane for once, but any theory is nothing but a hypothesis without evidence. So let's get into how V lived a bit. It all started in the middle of Dead End's runtime after Alice releases the Sentinels so they could find and go after Tessa and N after they escaped. Sparky, aka V's soon-to-be pet at the time, finds N standing inside of one of the abandoned office cubicles with Tessa, and promptly boot-loops him before dragging him away and throwing him against a nearby wall. Spoil warning. In an effort to save N while simultaneously keeping up her facade, and creating a giant black hole in the wall in the next room over using Uzi's body as a host. Dude, what the hell is she doing? Oh, fuck! Tessa tries to slowly approach Sparky and attempts to tame him, since she was the only one in the situation that could, as she was the only human there.
Hey, hello?
After Sparky bit Tessa, however, the sight of her blood completely corrupted his programming by giving him 2 conjoining objectives instead of 1: to eliminate AI targets by bootlooping them to become temporarily paralyzed before killing them, and to be a nice dingo to his human masters like Tessa was ordering him to do. This in turn causes Sparky to start freaking the fuck out before he accidentally hits his head against the same nearby wall he threw N against ironically and reading too fast, and shuts down on the floor. I think it's pretty safe to say that Sparky's new conjoining objectives severely affected who he viewed as targets. When his system later restarts after shutting down, a few electric surges can be seen coursing around his head as his eyes turn from a light neon shade of blue to a bright neon red. This color change was also seen to occur in both his internal screen vision, which is what I'm calling it for a lack of an accurate term for it, and his bootloop flashes. From Sparky's perspective now after he restarts, you can still see both objectives sitting on the bottom left of his internal screen, overlapping each other haphazardly in multiple repeated texts, further indicating that his programming, or more specifically his objectives, were now permanently fucking scrambled. Now there's a lot of strong evidence following this scene that heavily implies that Sparky was not only viewing Tessa specifically as his sole target after this happened to him. After Doll successfully traps the others with the Sentinels and makes her grand escape down the Cabin Fever Labs, Tessa once again steps in and attempts to try and stop the Sentinels in the same way she accidentally did with Sparky earlier, by intentionally cutting her hand with her sword and spewing out her blood so they could detect it and start malfunctioning.
Uh-oh! Hope I don't human everywhere!
As we can see, while this didn't end up doing anything to the other Sentinels, somehow, it did immediately draw Sparky's attention as he zoned in on Tessa's blood that was now splattered on the floor and detected it as an error in broken binary code mixed with real letters. He then shifted his attention on Tessa, who he also detected as an error with the text "Warn Null" instantly being written out underneath the error message multiple times, which, oh my god, was that also supposed to be foreshadowing that she was sin this whole fucking time? Now these 2 instances alone act as solid proof that he was in fact targeting Tessa specifically in that moment. Unlike the other Sentinels that immediately started pouring into the room and searching for Jerome life after Doll let them in by opening all the doors, Sparky didn't feel compelled to come out of his hiding spot and take action until he detected Tessa's blood splattered on the floor, and by extension her afterwards. It's also worth noting that he only started to use his bootloop flashes after he detected her in an attempt to paralyze her. When bootlooping her didn't work, however, he pulled out a dismembered disassembly drone forearm instead, which I'm pretty sure was the same one that Bo was using before he got killed, but we'll get to that, and shot a single bullet at her in a clear attempt to take her out. Not at Enver Uzi standing right beside her, just at Tessa.
Oh my Titus! Did I get it?
Now the fact that Sparky chose a gun out of all the weapon options he had on hand in that instance speaks volumes, because if you go back and take a look at the error messages that were rapidly appearing on Sparky's internal screen vision earlier after he first detected Tessa's blood, one of the first ones that were written out in slightly blurred text read, "Error, life form detected," meaning that despite some of the past arguments I've seen stating that Sparky was somehow able to detect that Sinessa was the one underneath the spacesuit. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Sparky was in fact viewing Tessa as a human this whole time. This has led me to believe that the reason why he switched to using this dismembered disassembly drone hand on her instead in the first place was because he once again witnessed firsthand Tessa spewing out more of her blood. The sight seemed to have instantly reminded him in that moment that Tessa was a human, so obviously bootlooping her like he usually did his AI targets wasn't going to do shit. But a gun sure as hell would have, thus explaining the sudden tactic switch up. Do I need to elaborate any further on that? No? Didn't think so. The only reason he wasn't able to get her in that moment despite his clean shot was because of V's swift intervention, which, speaking of V, notice how when he started zoning in on her and Tessa in this scene, he did not want to detect V as a target anymore like he did Tessa. It's almost as if he were now viewing the drones like he was meant to be viewing the humans. Wait a minute! The reason why Sparky was now viewing Tessa as his sole target and not the drones was because his corrupted programming completely switched his interpretation of both his objectives. Instead of understanding the objective eliminate AI targets as killing any and all drones he comes across, he now understands it as killing any and all humans he comes across, which includes Tessa in this case as, like we previously established, he was under the impression that she was a human and not Robot Satan disguised totally. When it comes to his new Be a Nice Dingo objective on the other hand, instead of understanding it as listening to the orders given to him by his human masters like Tessa intended, he now understands it as viewing the drones as his masters that he was meant to obey and by extension, protect. Now while I am using plural nouns to describe these two interpretations, a more accurate way of putting it is that Tessa was only really asking Sparky in that moment to obey her orders specifically, which in turn means that in order for him to fulfill his new Be a Nice Dingo objective, he understands that he now has to obey the orders given to him by one drone specifically. Want to take a guess at who that one drone ended up being? Now to further cement this section's point, main point. I'd like for us to just take a moment to carefully look at the absolutely badass sword fight that happened between V and Sparky. Now there's two ways in which we can interpret this scene. 1. Either Sparky had chosen to fight V back when she initiated because he wanted to get her out of the way first so he could go back to eliminating his actual target Tessa, or 2. Sparky viewed V pulling out her swords on him and sparring with him as the robot equivalent of a pet owner initiating a game of fetch with their pet. I'd like to think it's the latter option. But seriously, think about it. There's actually a lot of evidence that you can pinpoint in this very scene alone that supports option number 2 as being the situation. First off, throughout the entirety of the fight, Sparky had only chosen to use a sword to defend himself against V, despite having an array of options he could have easily switched between. Not to mention the fact that V was using this exact tactic herself throughout, likely as a way to gain an advantage against him all things considered. But regardless of all this, he still ultimately chose to stick to using his sword. Later at the end of the fight, after V throws him to the ground, he still tries to fight back by slowly reaching for her sword before she abruptly pulls out her laser gun on him and fully prepares to blast him with it, sending him all the way to hell Bakugou style.
You can just shut your mouth before I blast you all the way to hell!
At the sight of her laser gun now before him, Sparky instantly cowers in defeat and does not continue to try and fight back any further, even though he clearly still could have in that moment by boot looping her at the very least to avoid potentially getting killed. Both these points heavily imply that Sparky had no intention of actually hurting V in the first place going into this fight, which automatically rules out the first option as being a possibility. Because if it were really Sparky's goal to just get rid of the wall separating him from his target, he would have definitely put up more of a fight against V and take any opportunity he got to get closer to Tessa. But he didn't. And he had many opportunities where he could have. This also by extension further explains why Sparky didn't try to fight back anymore when V pulled out her laser gun on him, because when Sparky went into this fight with the intention of not hurting V, it's likely that he was also under the impression that she was not intending to hurt him either, and that this was all just for fun and games, not an actual serious fight like V was going into it as when she initiated it. Remember when I mentioned earlier how Sparky had chosen to only use a sword to defend himself throughout the entire fight? Well, the reason why I believe he picked it in the first place and stuck with it was because that was the very weapon V started off with when she kicked things off. So Sparky did the exact same thing, simply because he wanted to just play along with her. Yippee! She pulled out her sword! Let's play sword fighting, future mom! You honestly have to give Sparky credit, to be honest. He matched her energy without question, and I think that is absolutely respectable on his part. When V pulled out her laser gun on him now, he instantly cowered because he was not expecting her to actually attempt to hurt him, and might have even thought he did something wrong during the fight to upset her, which in turn led to him getting held at gunpoint as punishment. Now, I don't know how much that tells us about how the humans used to treat these guys before the planet imploded, but that's definitely another conversation for another day that I think is worth having. Like, just look at him, guys. He's like a scared dog that's getting scolded after disobeying their owner. Alright, time to get into the part of the video we've all been waiting for. Me especially, because this script has been taking me 5 centuries to finish. Let's start off by talking a little more in depth about Bee's sacrifice. Before Bee was able to get a chance to shoot Sparky with her laser gun and join the others inside the elevator, she immediately started to become surrounded by the other Sentinels, one of which who had completely stopped the elevator from being able to go down automatically by yanking out the proximity reader clean off. Upon seeing how things were playing out for both the others and, more importantly, herself, Via realized that the only way for at least 3 of them to make it out of this situation alive was if someone manually got the elevator down by disconnecting its steel ropes from its electric motor's pulley. The only issue with this plan was the fact that once the elevator got disconnected, fallen debris would inevitably follow its descent and completely seal off the last possible escape route within the room. This is proven in the beginning of episode 7 after the elevator crashes and becomes crushed by a bunch of large boulders that completely block off the sinkhole it fell from. This now meant that whoever chose to take on the task of getting the elevator down manually would be left behind with the mob of sentinels with no way of escaping, and no way of fighting back due to the roof flashes. Via knew for a fact that she was the only one that could get the elevator down manually within that moment. Uzi wasn't in any condition to use her solver after Sin's interference. Tessa obviously wouldn't have been able to do anything if she tried to get it down on her own, and N wouldn't have even been able to leave the elevator without getting boot looped. So that just left V, who already had her laser gun out and ready to fire, who already had enough distance to make a clean shot from where she was standing, who was already surrounded by sentinels with no way of making it to the elevator even if she tried.
Hey,
No! Steve! We need you!
nah. Uzi? I trust you.
Steve, please!
After V makes her choice and accepts her fate, she salutes N and Uzi with closed eyes as the sentinels slowly start to approach her. The episode then ends with the elevator's steel ropes snapping in half, before the screen cuts to black, leaving the aftermath of V's sacrifice unknown to us. I mean, except the fact that Sparky was slowly getting up while the other sentinels were surrounding her. Let's shift our focus now to what Sparky was doing this entire time as V's self-sacrifice was playing out. As the other sentinels started surrounding V, Sparky immediately took notice of everything that was happening before he slowly started to get up from the ground.
Hey,
No! Steve!
Later, when he's shown again while Via waits for the sentinels to kill her, you can see a clear difference in the way he goes about looking at her. Unlike the other sentinels, he doesn't approach her. He instead just looks at her with his head tilted and his back slightly hunched over. Now, we've already established earlier that it's heavily implied that Sparky didn't have any intentions at this point to actually hurt V in any capacity, because she was the drone that he specifically chose to obey and by extension protect in order to fulfill his new Viennite Stingo objective. I'm sure you can all see where I'm going with this right now. Seeing that Sparky had been observing V closely this entire time after their one-on-one fight, he was able to clearly see and understand as the other sentinels surrounded her that she was currently in a life-threatening situation with no way, or more importantly, intention of fighting back anymore. This, of course, was more than enough reason to prompt Sparky into stepping into her aid before any of the other sentinels could hurt her. just like any pet would jump to their owner's defense whenever they're in danger. The aftermath of V's sacrifice was implied from the start to be Sparky saving her life somehow, because his corrupted programming turned him into a terminal sentinel whose job it now was to obey and protect her, which explains perfectly how V was able to adopt him and keep him as a pet in the first place, like we initially saw at the beginning of episode 8 and onwards. Further evidence for this can be seen from both the photo and text V had sent Lizzie prior to Absolute End's events. The photo itself heavily implies that after Sparky saved V, they instantly bonded like a pet who just found their forever owner and vice versa. So V decided to thank him for his help by taking her with him to the surface as her new pet/epic sidekick. In the photo, we can see her playfully choking Sparky to highlight their newfound friendship, followed by a text message that reads, "I lived, bitch," cementing that the photo was meant to imply that V was only able to survive that day thanks to Sparky's help, and that she was clearly more than grateful to have him in her corner when she needed it the most, even if it was unexpected. God, that's such a goofy photo to put so much sentiment in. I fucking love it. My throat is not dying as much as the last time I recorded, but it's still... I don't even know how to describe how it feels right now, but we made it! So yeah, that's my theory on how I think V survived after Dead End's ending. I personally love this theory so much because it feels like it just fills in all the gaps that came with V surviving somehow after sacrificing herself. It just gives us a clear explanation for it that not only, in my opinion, makes sense, but also feels very satisfying, which makes my brain really happy every time I think about it. Now, there are other pieces of evidence I have for this theory I didn't share earlier because I didn't really know how to fit them in, like how Sparky never went out of his way to kill any more drones after Dead End thanks to his corrupted programming. I mean, sure, he did treat Lizzie like a fucking ragdoll in Absolute End after meeting her for the first time, but I'd like to think that was more out of one-sided beef rather than him viewing her as an actual target. So sue me. There's also the fact that after Sparky slowly got up from the ground, he had another perfect opportunity where he could have easily just boot-looped V and killed her along with the other Sentinels. But he didn't, because V was still his future mom at the time and he would never had her. Why the hell am I speaking in a really bad British accent right now? There's also another point I wanted to pop off about, where I thought that the elevator snapping sound that happened at the end of Dead End was actually Sparky biting one of the Sentinels, but I didn't want to make that argument because, like, it was clearly the freaking elevator wire snapping. What was I going on with that? The last piece of evidence I had that I specifically didn't mention due to it being a bit of a weak point was that Sparky saving V could also explain why she was unscathed during her grand entrance in episode 8, despite everything that happened just before that, since I think it's pretty safe to assume that if you're scrapping with a bunch of Sentinels that like to fight and tear off limbs, there's likely going to be some battle scars, you know? But then I remember that V is a fucking disassembly drone that can regenerate limbs and possibly even undergo automatic healing for scars or scratches, depending on how much of the Sorrow's ability the disassembly drones have. So it'd be a really messy argument to try and defend. Okay, final thing I have here on the agenda I'd like to address is why I think the disassembly drone forearm Sparky had been using in both episodes 6 and 8 was Bo's, or possibly just episode 8. Let me explain and cook. First off, Bo's disassembly drone hand was the only working one we saw throughout the entirety of Dead End other than V and Ends, though I am aware it is possible that him and Alice likely had multiple lying around. They killed a lot of disassembly drones overall. The thing is though, Bo had dropped his after he got killed by one of the Sentinels, which has led me to believe that there are two possible explanations as to how Sparky acquired them in the first place. The first one I had in mind was that the Sentinel that killed Bo decided to pick it up afterwards and ended up giving it to Sparky, since I do remember that one of the Sentinels did call him over for something that was never disclosed while he was following the trap footsteps that the others had set for him, so maybe that scene was always meant to imply when Sparky had received it. The second explanation was actually inspired by GoldPikmin's V Deep Dive video, which I highly recommend you check out after this along with all their other Murder Drones Deep Dive character analyses because they're really good. So in that video, they actually pointed out that they think that Sparky ended up with Bo's hat because V likely went back for it before she left the Cabin Fever Labs and gave it to him as a way to honor him for saving her earlier, which in turn is what led me to personally believe that Sparky also had Bo's disassembly shown forearm in the first place. Now thinking about that exclamation, it made me realize that it's also possible that V decided to pick up Bo's disassembly drone hand as well while she was there, to replace the previous one Sparky was using, since she did break off one of its weapons with a clean bullet shot. The latter explanation definitely makes sense with this theory specifically, considering that both Sparky and Bo did save V's life that day. So what better way for her to honor Bo's death than to give her other hero his belongings as a way to remember him by? Anyways, with all that said, that pretty much wraps up today's video. Fucking finally, it's 2 AM for me right now. Thank you guys so much for watching and for being so patient with me on this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that it also makes your brain really happy to think about. I don't get a lot of opportunities to make lighthearted theories like this, so this was a really fun change in pace for me. Leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more fun theory videos like this from me in the future. Have a wonderful rest of your day, geniuses, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out and go rewatch Murder Drones while you're at it. You might get a sick as hell theory out of it.
Can you set me free? Will you take my soul away? Casting me in cold, bury me in bones, rest eternally.
My throat will probably never stop dying when I'm recording anything, and I don't know how to fix that. Whatever we bawl, I guess. Maybe I should stop trying to be nervous when I'm reading.